Welcome everyone to the Icebox Canyon Virtual Open House. My name is Sloan and I'm the Communications Manager for the project. Thank you so much for joining us today. With me today is Joel Bosher. He's the pre-construction engineer for the Missoula District for MDT. He is stepping in for Bob Vosen today. Ben Shadell, who's the project manager for MDT. Also on the call is Mark Bancal, Trevor Iman are the project managers for the consultant design firm MGM Group, and Greta Palkowski, Greta, is the engineer for environmental engineer for WGM. Also on the call is my colleague Katie, who will be facilitating the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So if you have any questions anytime during this presentation, please feel free to write it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we will address it at the end. So to start today's presentation, we'll give a brief overview of MDT's Vision Zero initiative, and then also the Icebox Canyon project. Then we'll outline the proposed improvements, talk a bit about the environmental assessment reevaluation and why it is important. And at the end of the session, we'll have the Q&A session, as I mentioned. So to get started, I would like to introduce Joel, who will discuss this Vision Zero initiative. It's tough to say. Joel, take it away.
Thank you, Sloan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joel Boucher with the Department of Transportation. I'm the Missoula District Pre-construction engineer, just like Sloan had said. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us in this virtual open house. Enhancing the roadway safety features of Icebox Canyon, along with Montana's thousands of miles of state roads and highways, is a vital component of Vision Zero. Vision Zero is an ongoing statewide collaboration among agencies and organizations which strives for the goal of zero deaths and zero serious injuries on Montana's roadways. We thank you for doing your part to help MDT on this mission by driving safely and responsibly on Montana roadways. I'll now hand the presentation over to Trevor, who will provide an overview of Icebox Canyon project.
Thank you, Joel. My name is Trevor Iman, and I'm the project manager for WGM Group, working for the Department of Transportation. So the Icebox Canyon project is located on Montana 35, starting just to the south of Peaceful Drive and ending just to the north of Chapman Hill Road. Next slide, Sloan. So for this project, we're proposing improvements with, as you can see, 12-foot wide travel lanes, curb and gutter for the urban portion of the project, which is from Peaceful Drive out to Bear Hollow Drive. And then in the areas where it's necessary, we're proposing a centered left turn lane, raised medians to facilitate a little bit slower traffic in the 35-mile-an-hour areas, and then dedicated north turn lanes at Chapman Hill Road. Included with this project are drainage improvements, and a shared use path are proposed throughout the project at this time. Specifically in the urban area, from Peaceful Drive to the north, approximately to Branding Iron Station, path on both sides of the roadway. And then from Branding Iron Station out to the end of the project at Chapman Hill Road, we're proposing a shared use path on the west side of the roadway that would be 10 feet wide. So just to go through kind of what the typical section of this project will look like. In the urban area, we are proposing curb and gutter, as we talked about, 2 travel lanes and a turn lane in the center, and then paths on both sides. As you can see in this typical section, we have some challenges with existing businesses and property owners, and that's why we're looking at using curb and gutter to control the drainage and narrow this section up as much as possible, and still maintain the intent of the project, provide for the safety improvements and drainage throughout this vicinity. Next slide, Sloan. So as you enter the canyon itself, we are proposing a center median to separate lanes of traffic and provide geometry that will allow reduced speeds to naturally occur throughout this area. We will be providing, as I mentioned, the shared use path on the north side, or on the west northwest, I guess, throughout most of this portion of the project. Right now, there's not been a determination of what the median looks like as far as landscaping. There is some proposed landscaping, but that will come at a future stage of the project. At this time, we're just proposing the median, knowing that there needs to be additional public involvement and work with the community to identify what that will look like. And then the final section of this project is further to the north between Bear Hollow Drive and Chapman Hill Road. The top section is the rural 2-lane section, 12-foot travel lanes, shoulders, a separated bike path on the northwest side, and that will extend till the need is developed for providing a left turn lane, which is the bottom section, into Chapman Hill Road. So when we approach that section, we'll be adding the turn lane. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Mark Bankow, and he's going to talk about the environmental.
Thank you, Trevor. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to learn more about this project. The part of the project that we're doing now is called an environmental assessment reevaluation. The original environmental assessment for this project was completed in 2004, and the decision document that said here's the preferred alternative and here's what we're going to do was signed in 2011. Time has passed, and so now it's incumbent upon the DOT to go back and to revisit some of the environmental analysis, and that's what's called a reevaluation. We won't redo everything, but we need to update some things. So that's why an environmental assessment reevaluation is necessary. We got feedback at our first public meeting that resulted in some design changes to what the roadway will look like. And those are going to be reevaluated, as well as updating any species of concern or things of that nature that have changed in the environmental world since that 2004 document. The current reevaluation includes only the Icebox Canyon project area and south of there down to Grand Avenue and Holt Drive. And so the question is, well, if all we're proposing to build right now, the only thing that we're designing right now is the Icebox Canyon project, why are we also looking as far south as the Holt Drive intersection? And the reason for that is decisions that we make today regarding changes to the way the road will look, there's a great chance that those will influence decisions made when the next segment of the project is designed down to Highway 35. So instead of just looking at the Icebox Canyon area in a vacuum, we wanted to take a higher level holistic view of the proposed design changes looked at in the reeval for that entire length of the roadway to cover all the bases. So, as I mentioned, this reevaluation could, the original environmental evaluation, went all the way down to Woods Bay. And we're currently going to be looking just at basically from Holt Drive to Chapman Hill Road. And that's why the reevaluation is being done. As far as what are the design changes that we're looking at in the reevaluation, so that's on the next slide. I believe, there you go. So we are going to be reducing the overall width of the roadway, at least through the urban and canyon area. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail on the next slide. But part of the reason for this is that when the original environmental analysis was done, there's feedback from the community that said, we don't want the roadway to look urban. We want the roadway through our community to continue to look very rural. So we don't want curb and gutter. We want to do roadside ditches to address drainage rather than having curb and gutter. So the first bullet item you see here, reducing the overall width of the improvements, is to revisit that line of thinking and determine whether we should actually use curb and gutter instead. Another change is the elimination of a large entry feature at the south end of the canyon. The original EA envisioned a very wide, very large decorative entry feature in the middle of the roadway at approximately where the Branding Iron Station building is now. And so there's no longer room for that because of that Branding Iron Station development. And so that will be eliminated from the proposal. Then removing certain right turn lanes that were considered in the environmental assessment that are no longer considered to be necessary based on design year traffic volumes, and extending the shared use path on the east side of the roadway to the north end of the project. There's certain paths and sidewalks in the EA, but a path that extends all the way to Chapman Hill Road was not envisioned in the EA. So we're going to address that in the EA reevaluation. And then should that path be constructed? Well, it's been addressed, and if it hasn't, no harm done, but at least we've got that base covered. And there's discussion probably a little bit further on about the decision point that needs to be reached with regard to that path and whether it will be extended further. So on the final slide here, on my next slide, we're looking at some cross-section elements for the urban area of the project. So the existing urban cross-section is at the top of this slide, and it shows a two-way left turn lane, which currently exists in front of the building supply store and basically tapers out through the Peaceful Drive intersection. And then a travel lane in each direction and a narrow shoulder in each direction. And that shows the existing urban section of the road. In the middle of this drawing is the section of road through the urban part of town that was envisioned in the original environmental assessment document. It includes a 16-foot area in the middle that would be either for a median or for left turn lanes, a travel lane in each direction, and then an 8-foot shoulder, a 10-foot slope, a 10-foot path, a 3-foot path shoulder, and then on at least one side, if not both, a wide drainage ditch. You can probably imagine that by looking at here that that's a much wider roadway footprint than exists today and would be potentially impactful upon the property owners and businesses through that urban part of the town. And so at the first open house that was held, folks said, how about we consider something more narrow? Why don't we go ahead and revisit the curb and gutter? It seems like that would be a way to reduce the overall width of these improvements by eliminating that drainage ditch. And so at the bottom of the drawing shows what is currently being considered in the environmental reevaluation. The area in the middle, the median and the travel lanes are the same, but then instead of an 8-foot shoulder, there's a narrower shoulder with curb and gutter, followed by a boulevard and a path. And the drainage, roadway drainage, takes place in the curb and gutter, and so the large drainage ditch can be eliminated and the overall width of the project minimized. So those are the things that need to be addressed in the environmental reevaluation that is currently underway. And with that, I am going to turn the presentation now over to Ben Shandell. Ben is the project manager for MDT, who will review the project schedule with us.
Thank you, Mark. So just giving you a brief update on the project and the progression. So we initially started this project from the Woods Bay all the way to the Chapman Hill Road. And that was how we completed the environmental assessment for the overall project length. And then at this point, we've kind of decided that would be too expensive to construct that entire section in one project. So we've split the project into a smaller project from Peaceful Drive to Chapman Hill Road, and we are currently we're currently in the process of completing the design. We're about 30% with the design at this point. We've tried to have multiple options for the public to comment on the design as we progress, and we will be moving forward with design and taking your input into consideration as we move forward. So at this point, we do not have a timeline on when the project will be completed, but we hope to have a project ready to build and fund it as funding comes available. I will now pass the presentation back to Sloan, who will share how you can contact the team with any future questions or feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you, team. If you have any questions or feedback or concerns, you can contact us at any time by emailing me, Sloan at bigskypublicrelations.com, or by calling the project hotline. All the contact information is on the slide, so please take note of it. This information is also going to be on the project's webpage, and also a recording of this virtual open house will be posted as well. So I will now pass it over to Katie for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Sloan, and thanks to all of our presenters. So as Sloan had said earlier in our presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to add those into the Q&A section at the bottom of our screen. It looks like 2 chat bubbles, and I'll go ahead and get that started. So it looks like we have 1 comment, and folks, please continue to add those in as we continue. So I'll turn this over to you first, Trevor. A question from Julie, wondering if a left-hand turn lane onto Bear Hollow Drive for those headed south on 35 is being proposed.
It is not currently in the plan that we have today, but we have received comment at the public open house we held yesterday regarding that. So we will take that into consideration and see what the alternatives look like to provide that in the future.
Great, thank you, Trevor. At this time, that was the only question that we had. So we will continue to stay on and leave the screen up that has all of Sloan's contact information as we continue to move forward with the project, and we'll wait for other questions to roll in for a few more minutes. There we go, there are a few more coming in. So one from Claude, again for you, Trevor. It says, no end date is currently planned. Is there a preferred start date identified?
So I'm going to have to make some assumptions here with that question. Specifically, start date on design. As soon as we finish this meeting, we'll be consolidating all of the comments, finalizing the environmental document, and then moving into the next phase of design. And the reason that's important is because we need to be working on design so that we can identify the right-of-way necessary and then start that process. Because even if we design something and don't have the available right-of-way and cannot buy it, when funding for construction does become available, we won't be able to construct the project. So that's kind of the start of it. There's no end date. We currently know that it's outside of the 5-year funding horizon that MDT identifies yearly, but it is a priority for the department, and they will be working to identify funding timeline on a yearly basis, at least, with their annual updates.
Great, thank you, Trevor. And Claude, if that didn't fully answer your question, or if there's anything more, feel free to add that back into the Q&A and we'll revisit it. So next, again for you, Trevor, a question from Dylan, wondering what the justification is for the northbound left turn lane onto Chapman Hill Road. Is it based on traffic volumes or anything else?
I think I'm actually going to pass this one to Mark. He has done the traffic volumes, but it was originally included in the environmental document. And now, Mark, I guess I'll let you take that.
Yes, Trevor said it was included in the document, and then we did a traffic analysis to determine whether it continues to be justified. And so to try to directly answer the question, yes, it is based on traffic volumes. That decision is a combination of the number of vehicles wanting to turn left, the number of vehicles wanting to continue through on that same approach that the left turner is on, and the number of vehicles coming in the other direction that they have to find a gap through. But it is based on traffic volumes.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Trevor. Next from Kelly, wondering how the new development north of Chapman Hill Drive on the east side is being integrated into this plan. Trevor, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So north of Chapman Hill Drive, is that correct, Katie?
Yes.
So currently the development is, to my knowledge, in systems impact review, and the intent at this time is for the developer to approach MDT, come up with a plan for how they would like to access the property, and in coordination with this project, they will pay for it and make the improvements in the interim prior to this project being constructed. And then once they have those approach permits and the information available and have installed it, we will reevaluate how we address those new driveways as they don't currently exist today.
Thanks, Trevor. Great question, Kelly. We had a lot of those last night as well. So certainly if there's anything related, please feel free to follow up and we can dive into more detail. Looks like we have two more in the queue, one more for you, Trevor, and then the last one I think I'm going to throw over to you, Joel. So first question, Trevor, will you have a visual overlay showing how the proposals interface with the current road?
Yes, and that will be posted on the website following this meeting, including all of the boards that you saw today and the information related to timelines, et cetera, that you saw on this webinar.
Great, thanks, Trevor. And Jim, just to add on to that on Sloan's behalf, since I have the mic open, we will be posting this recording as Trevor had alluded to, and Sloan will also be sending out a thank you email to all of our attendees, both from yesterday's in-person open house and from this afternoon. So you'll have a link to all of that content here probably next week or so. With that, I think we can move on to the next question. Joel, I think this might be for you, but certainly feel free to pass on to somebody else. Talking about long-term maintenance. So who would be responsible for maintenance and snow removal of the walking paths? Does MDT do this, or would the property owners be responsible?
And Katie, I'll be honest with you, I have not checked the maintenance agreements on this, but typically there's a maintenance agreement filled out in place beforehand that really outlays who is responsible for that. Oftentimes that's worked out with either the city or the county. In this particular one, Trevor, maybe I see you turned your camera on, so you might have a better example of this if you helped write that agreement, but I have not reviewed it.
Yeah, so Mark kind of alluded to this previously, and we are anticipating constructing the shared use path with this project, provided a maintenance agreement can be reached with the county. Big Fork is an unincorporated town in the city or in the state of Montana, and MDT has a policy that requires them to sign maintenance agreements with entities. One of the caveats to this is we will be constructing that path provided a maintenance agreement and long-term funding solution can be found for that maintenance. It's been suggested that there are a couple of alternatives of how that will work. Potentially a rural SID maintenance agreement. Something similar was just done in the Evergreen community next to Kalispell, but we have not identified how that will be done at this time.
Thanks, Trevor. So if I don't have a name, unfortunately, it says anonymous on my end, but if you have questions beyond that or want to know what that looks like in more detail, feel free to shoot Sloan an email at the contact information provided on this screen, and she can follow up and we can get you copies of all of that. That is certainly no problem, but thank you both. So I'm seeing 2 more questions here. Next is from Pam. Again, for you, Trevor. So it says, if the new proposed subdivisions along MT35 and Big Fork are approved and they contribute to a large increase in traffic volume, will developers be contributing money to fund traffic solutions?
Yes, and I previously mentioned the SIOP process. So MDT's process, the intent of it is to have the developers pay to mitigate the impacts that they have on the state system based on their traffic volumes. I know for a fact that the settlement, which is the development to the north, has been in the SIOP process and in discussions with MDT. I believe the one that's closer to Peaceful Drive is also working with the department and the county to look at the impacts to this system.
Thanks, Trevor. Okay, next, another from Claude wondering, does the EA include any wildlife travel studies for the area of the canyon? Or do the current wildlife travel studies in the area already exist and are they being considered? And kind of as a follow-up to that, wondering if the plan currently contemplates an over or underpass structure to support wildlife collision reductions and safe passage in the immediate scope of the build out or in any future expansions. Trevor, I might start with you and then see where we need to go from there.
Sure. So currently the plan does not include any overpasses or underpasses in the region of the Icebox Canyon to facilitate animal passage. I think I'm going to pass the remainder of that question. You may need to repeat it to Greta.
Sure. Let's see. Greta, are you able to hear or speak at this point? I can't tell if you're on the participant list.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah, the original EA did not include any wildlife travel studies for the area, and one is currently not planned for the reevaluation. There was a biological resource report completed in 2019, and with that report, the consultant looked at updated traffic collision information, but there was no in-depth wildlife traffic study completed. And I am unaware of any that have been completed in the area by MDT, but perhaps one of the MDT personnel on the call might know of another one in the area.
Thanks, Greta. Let's see. Joel or anybody, anything else to add, or should we maybe look if we need to follow up with Claude further?
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you. All right, the last question that I'm seeing here, again for you, Trevor, how is the runoff from the curb and gutter going to be handled?
So the runoff from the curb and gutter is currently anticipated to be put in a pipe system and taken towards the south. We are currently discussing with an adjacent landowner the alternative of placing a stormwater pond on their parcel and then acquiring that parcel from them. It would be a little bit to the south of the Peaceful Drive intersection, kind of below and behind, I guess, the bank down there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trevor. Those are all of the questions that are in our queue. So, oh, there's another one. Okay, so following up based on that maintenance agreement discussion earlier, question is, if no agreement is reached with the county, will the community be able to provide an opportunity for additional involvement to identify an acceptable maintenance solution? Thoughts, Trevor?
Yeah, so I think that as we're moving towards final design with this project, we are anticipating the path is a desire of the community, and we would expect that the community is communicating with the county to facilitate that maintenance agreement. We will be having additional public meetings in the future and working potentially. I know we talked with the chamber a little bit last night. I know that Bob Vosen with MDT has been talking to the county commissioners directly. Our suggestion would be that the residents of the area talk to their local commissioner. I believe that is Pam Holmquist. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then potentially directly with County Public Works to facilitate that solution.
Perfect. Thanks again, Trevor. Let's see, those were the questions that we have. So maybe Sloan, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe we just leave this open for a couple more minutes. And with that, there was another question, just wondering if the question and answer session from last night was recorded and can it be referenced? And I'll just go ahead and answer that one. So last night was an in-person open house. We did not have a formal presentation or anything like that. We had these similar displays to what you're seeing here on the presentation up as large boards that folks could walk around and talk to various members of the project team, many of whom are on this call today, but it was not recorded. This is the only piece of our a formal presentation that's going to be recorded. But if there's something specific that you're looking for or that we can try to rehash from last night, certainly reach out to Sloan here and we can follow up with any more specifics. So Sloan, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great.
And there's as I say that, there's another question that just came in,
Okay.
which is all good, from John. Wondering if there will be any additional land needed for this project from current landowners. Trevor, could you maybe talk about right away a little?
Yeah, we anticipate that some parcels will need right-of-way acquisition to occur on their frontage. I don't have an exact number, and at this point, that's why we're trying to finalize our design intent. We do not have an actual graphic of any type showing exactly what that would be or how much it would be for any individual landowner. But in the future, as we finalize the design, those will become apparent. And as right-of-way acquisition is started, individual landowner meetings to discuss that will be set up.
Perfect. Thank you, Trevor. Okay. I'm hesitant to say that's it. So I'll turn it again. We'll try. I'll turn it back over to you, Sloan, and we'll see if any other questions come in the interim.
Okay, great, Katie. Thank you so much for moderating. So just a reminder that we are recording this session and we will be posting it on the webpage along with the display boards from last night and these slides as well. And so you can access those probably beginning of next week. I will also be sending out a thank you email to all the attendees, both the in-person and virtual. And I will make sure there's links to all of this material on the MDT webpage. So if there's no further comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. You can contact us through the contact information on this slide. And yeah, if you have no further questions, I think that's it for today. And we thank you so much for joining us today and have a great afternoon.